All right, it's the Lex and Pete show. This is week 6 edition. We are recording Thursday night. I have no problem stepping away from this game real quick. It's a very ugly one. We got Nick Wallace on the show, the team owner, general manager, coach of team I Love My Mom. Before we get to him, let's get a word from our sponsors real quick. As always, Lex and Pete is brought to you by Sundog Multimedia. Sundog is an online communication and social media company. They were once just a personal tool that has since evolved into something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact their lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you to help build a modern yet nimble social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional media principles. Sundog is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. You can follow Sundog on Instagram at Sundog_multimedia. Once again, it's Sundog Multimedia on Instagram at Sundog_multimedia. Brains, brawn, and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service. Moving, muscle for hire, assembly, errands, you name it. Easy peasy is a multi-purpose team. Need something? Just ask. All right. Before we get to our guest real quick, as always, we are here with Slippery Pete. Slippery, how are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling amazing. Nick Wallace, welcome to the Lex and Pete show. First guest of the 2022 season. I'm excited to be here, boys. It's gonna be a good. It's gonna be a good show today. I got a good feeling. Jeez.
Yep. And of course, as Pete said, our first guest of the season, Nick Wallace. I love my mom. Nick, how are you feeling tonight?
Feeling good, man. First time, long time. So, honored to finally got the call. I was expecting it a couple weeks ago when I was, facing Finesse BB Jones. And then, when that matchup didn't swing in your favor, I had a feeling it might not get the call for a couple weeks. So here I am, better late than never, excited to be here.
Early shot.
Yeah, I will say I would have been a little more eager to get you on had I won. I didn't have much to say afterwards, so I figured there was no point in trying to fill the script with that. But, to your success, that is kind of why we wanted to have you on here. So I'll run down the standings real quick, or actually I'll go through the week 5 results real quick. 2 Pins defeated the Slow Stroke Kings. McMorrow defeated Go Tigers. I Love My Mom defeated Slippery Pete. The Shits defeated Waukesha. The Vibers blew out the Zits. That's no disrespect to the Zits. The Vibers put up 178.16 points. I'll have to check the league records.
That's not credit to talent.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the league records, I don't know if they show the top 5 or the top 10, but that's got to be up there. And then as well, Big Brain defeated the Most Athletic Suns. They actually doubled up their score there. Big Brain also put up a huge 157.18 points. Right now, we actually had a swing in the playoffs because of the Vibers' huge week. The Vibers are now the 1 seed with a pretty big lead right now over the Zits. They have 712.48 points for. The Zits are in second with 658.14. Did I say the Zits or the Shits? The Shits are in second with 658.14. And the Zits are in third with 517.80. The wild card teams are 2 Pins, who are actually outscoring the Shits by half a point. But because of the division, they are in 4th place. Big Brain is 7 points behind them. And McMorrow is about 100 points behind Big Brain. And then kind of the last couple out, we got Wallace in 7th place. He's 9 points behind McMorrow, actually slightly inside of 9 points. And then Mikey Go Tigers, 27 points behind Wallace. And then the Suns are 7 points behind Mikey. So I feel like those are kind of the teams we're looking at as far as this, this chase we've talked about for that 6 seed. I'll swing it to Wallace real quick. How are you feeling with where you're at in the season? I feel like for where we were thinking beginning of the season, I think you've been a bit of a surprise. You've definitely made some moves since the start of the season. Most, I'd say, infamously, the Mikey Bowen trade where you got Trevor Lawrence. So we're gonna have to have Mikey on at some point to talk about it. I did get a little birdie told me I hadn't checked everybody's lineup this week that Justin Fields is actually starting for Mikey this week, but he's not on the show. We won't talk too much about him. Wallace, how are you feeling in 7th place, 9 points out of a playoff spot right now?
I'd love to say that this was all calculated and that we thought we'd be in the hunt here, but truly a bit pleasantly surprised by the team's performance. I think that you guys touched upon this, wasn't kidding about first time, long time, listen to the episode last week. I know you guys were kind of talking about the squad and whatnot. I think the important thing isn't necessarily whether I'm competing or trying to rebuild. It's really just trying to acquire, some players that fit my timeline. I was kind of looking through the roster and feel like for the most part, the team's in a good spot, mostly comprised of young players that I feel pretty good about. So frankly, the fact that we're a little ahead of schedule, we're competing a bit early. But frankly, I don't think I have a lot of aging talent that is kind of bogging down my roster. If one of the older guys in my rosters does emerge and I can get some value for him, I'll probably look to move him on out. But I'm pretty happy with how things have gone.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the aging talent, because when you look at it, I guess we can kind of just go through your roster real quick. But so your quarterbacks right now, you got Trevor Lawrence, you got Zach Wilson. I'd say that the jury's still kind of out on both of them. I'm personally really high on Trevor Lawrence. I think maybe the stats don't tell the whole story. He started off really strong. Of course, he's been, faltering a little bit with the turnovers and whatnot in the past couple of weeks, but I think that's just part of the growing pains of, being a young quarterback. And I feel like where fans are right now in the NFL, players aren't really allowed to develop and kind of come along. And, I've been talking about this a lot where, more so with receivers, I feel like guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and even a guy like Jalen Waddle to an extent, who came in and broke the rookie receiving record, receptions record. It's like, people expect you to just come in, put up 1,000+ yards, 7 to 10 touchdowns, all these receptions, put up crazy points, be a top 15 guy right away. And that's not really how it's gone, in years past. I kind of point to Devonte Smith, where what his rookie season was kind of a prototypical stud rookie year, where I think he just eclipsed 1,000 yards. He had, a few touchdowns. He had some really big games. We also had some weaker games as well. And, I think that Trevor Lawrence, he's looked really good to me. Personally, I'm not sold on Zach Wilson. I have a tweet from draft night where I said he is like the easiest bust to spot. A Jets fan replied to me and said it's actually Drew Lock, and I replied back, so it's the same thing. But we can continue going through your roster before we kind of dive into it. Breece Hall has been breaking out. Kenneth Walker has a huge opportunity now with Rashad Penny getting injured, and I feel like that's kind of what everybody expected, right? People thought, well, Penny looked great, at the end of last season. He had a great opportunity coming into it, but it was more of just a ticking time bomb of when was he going to get hurt. It was never really a matter of if. Of course, DK, Waddle, you're very strong there at receiver. And then, I feel like when we kind of get into the depth, it's more of, some weaker pieces, and then some guys like Jahan Dotson, Sky Moore, who, Dotson showed some flashes. Obviously, he's been dealing with the injuries. Sky Moore has been, more slowly coming along in that Chiefs system, but you've got a lot of good building blocks. TJ Hawkinson had that huge week, and, he's always been an interesting tight end prospect. But, what do you feel like are your strengths and weaknesses right now with your roster? And, do you think this kind of success is sustainable, or do you feel like maybe it was just more of a hot start and there's a comeback to earth moment, waiting?
Yeah, you look at the top 6 of my roster when a Hawk's on bye this week, but Lawrence, Breece, Walker, Metcalf, Waddle, and then Hawkinson. I think those are guys that could start for a contending team. I feel really strong about that. I feel really strong about the timeline, their timelines, their age, in coordination with the rest of the roster, and kind of what my draft capital is looking like. But I think beyond that is where it gets pretty rough, to be honest with you. It's like I'm starting a couple guys, kind of piecing it together at basically the flex positions. And, I do agree with you for the most part on Zach Wilson. I reached on him pretty high in the dispersal draft, but that was really just due to the scarcity at the position. I felt like he was really the only quarterback you could count on. And to my knowledge, the administration that drafted him is still in place. So that basically means he's guaranteed to be the starter for, I would say at least 1 or 2 more years after this one. And, he hasn't really played that many games this year to judge too far, but I feel solid about him. Every quarterback in Dynasty and Superflex has value. So I like that he's at least going to have a longish leash here. But yeah, I think I have, two building blocks at running back, obviously getting the first 2 picks in this past year's draft, Waddle and DK, and then, Wilson and Lawrence. And then Hawkinson, I honestly consider a top 5 dynasty tight end. That might be a bit controversial, but it's really more due to the lack of talent at that position. But I think, he's shown talent. His age fits the timeline of my team. But everyone else beyond that, I think is kind of interchangeable. But I think I've developed a nice core where I feel really comfortable about trying to maintain those guys and add more talent to that. And I think I've put myself in that position having, 5 picks in the first 2 rounds of the next year's draft, where I can kind of fill up those holes. I know it's going to be a quarterback heavy draft, kind of hope to grab one there and see what my team looks like going into next season.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting before we swing it over to Pete is where most of your points are coming from is really your core. So all these guys that you're saying are interchangeable. It's like when you do change them, you're not really going to be giving up too many points. And I feel like you can kind of find those points elsewhere. So I feel like we're where you're at. I think you're kind of in a good spot if you want to make that push for that 6th spot where, we're hearing about guys like McMorrow who might be looking to tear it down any week now. And, you don't really have the tools in place to kind of go for that full strip down. You're kind of where you're at, like you said, with that young core. So I feel like it's one of those where if you just kind of stick it out, you might almost just get that 6th seed by default, because I think you're, I don't want to speak too soon, but I think you have a pretty good lead over guys like Mikey and Jalot. And then if McMorrow decides to tear it down, I feel like that's who you're competing with. Then it's like, it's almost like you're kind of at the top and it's on those teams below you to kind of figure out where to pick it up. Pete, what do you think about Wallace's team, where it stands and kind of their outlook for the rest of the season? We can kind of, we'll do the rest of the season first and we'll kind of see what you think. Cause you are the, the dynasty prince, the rebuild prince. So we'll see what you think about his long-term outlook as well.
Yeah, there's no rebuild here. I think there was right before the dispersal draft. But after we got the dispersal draft, people were saying Wallace was making noise early. They were saying this team is good. Like there were messages in our group chats that said Wallace is going to win a couple games this year. So we knew he had talent, but his guys are overperforming. So I think he kind of hit the nail on the head with saying like he doesn't have any older aging pieces that he could move. I made the point last week that like Corey Davis could probably go. But again, that's not that much. So I think he's just kind of along for the ride right now, like riding his young talent. And I think it hurts him. Like Nick, you were kind of like, you sound excited about the success early, but I don't think you consider yourself a championship team, even if you're a playoff team. And you own your own picks. So I love it. Owning all the picks I have, I think you're getting better and Jalot's getting worse. So I think you're along for the ride. There's not a lot of moves to make except maybe like a Corey Davis. And I could totally see you playing your way in your playoff. It's against McMorrow, Mikey, Jalot, and you. So it's a four-man race, in my opinion, for that 6th spot. And I wouldn't say you're the favorite, but I think you're definitely in the conversation.
Yeah. So I'll say, as it stands right now, the lottery is going from 6 to 1. It's the Suns, then Wallace, Go Tigers, Waukesha, Slow Stroke Kings, Slippery Pete. I'd say when you're looking at that lottery, though, Go Tigers, they're in that 4th spot with 600.68 potential points or max points for whatever. And then Wallace is in that 5th spot, 71 more points. So I feel like there's only so far you can drop, especially with that young core that we were talking about where, a lot of your points aren't really going anywhere. So it's one of those where, why not try and compete, right? Or why not try and get that 6th spot? Just kind of see what happens. I mean, that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of the spot I was in these first 2 years, but also my team was much older. So I was doing that. And that's kind of why I decided to strip it down, because it's like, if this is just kind of what my team's going to be and my team's so old, then what am I kind of doing sitting around on this? If I didn't really have the tools to upgrade and, do all that, then I felt like stripping it down, getting younger and kind of trying to, start over. But it's like, you have these young guys and, you have Simcoe's 1st round pick. You have your own 1st round pick. So if you don't make the playoffs, then, you're looking at a 5th or 6th overall pick, which there's still tons of value there. And then you also have Simcoe's pick, and then you also have Mikey's pick. And if Mikey doesn't make the playoffs, he's looking at a top 4 pick. So it's like, you're going to have a mid 1st, and then you're going to have, a pretty early 2nd rounder. And that's still plenty to build off of given what you already have. If your roster was depleted and you were just somehow, getting these points and getting to that spot, then it'd be maybe more worrisome, because it's like, if you get a 6th overall pick, what are you going to do with that? But I mean, you got DK, you got Waddle, you got these running backs now. I'd say you have at least one quarterback. So it's like, why not go out there, see what's there in a quarterback heavy draft, a running back heavy draft. I think that you can still get plenty with those picks. So it's like, why not try and do it? Is that kind of how you feel as well?
Yeah, I think you guys hit it on the head for the most part. Honestly, it's getting reps in too, right? I mean, this is the first time I've been in a dynasty league. This is the first time I've been in a super flex league. First time
Definitely
in a league.
Learning curve.
Yeah, so it's like, I'm just trying to play the game a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, making waiver claims. Even if it's a veteran or somebody that might not be a long-term option. Maybe he becomes into a multi-week starter, goes on a hot streak, and I dump him off for a third in a couple weeks or something like that, right? I mean, those are all things that. If I have that budget, if I have, those reps doing that, that'll just kind of set me up for the long term. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm pretty happy with how it goes. You kind of look back on some of the moves that I made in the off season, and, if I knew what I knew now, I probably could have even been more of a contender if I had, held on to guys like Jalen Hurts and, pulled a trigger on Saquon, because apparently he was in the bargain bin, and, Simcoe was the one that scooped him up. But regardless, I like where I'm at, and I think it's a matter of getting those reps. And I don't think I'm that far away either. I already talked about feeling really good about the core six that I have in place right now. And all it takes is, a guy like Tony or Dotson, Sky Moore to get into the rotation a little bit more consistently. And then, I even have those flex spots filled out, and I think they have a lot of upside as well. So, I'm targeting quarterback, looking early into next year's draft. And as long as I can kind of get a QB3 / maybe a QB2 if Wilson doesn't pan out, I don't think I'm far away from being a true contender as soon as next year. So I don't think I'm really hurting my stock at all by even kind of sneaking into the playoffs here. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I'm definitely going to set the best lineup possible and use my fab and kind of see where I end up.
Yeah, I mean, you getting the 6 seed and talking about, hurting yourself. It's like you're kind of looking at it where if you advance, then word, because if you win in the first round, you're 1 win away from being in the championships. And if you lose in the first round, then you finish with a pick that's like 1, maybe 2 picks worse than what you would have had. So it's like,
Yeah.
I think that we're starting to see it now that we're getting more rookie drafts where you can get guys like Garrett Wilson and Olave, in that middle half of the round, and you're not really missing out on anything. And because if it was that easy, right? If it was so easy to just predict, okay, this guy's going to be the best rookie, then this guy will be second best, then it'll just take away all the fun of it. So it's like, there's still plenty of opportunity. What's that?
It's not hard for some of us.
I mean, what have you really done? I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know. I had to ask you again. I couldn't hear you from the basement. But anyways, I don't know. Pete, you got any questions for Wallace? You got any?
Yeah, Nick, you mentioned your offseason moves. A lot of moves. You've made 8 trades so far this year since entering the league. It's pretty high. Pretty high. I think you might be second in total trades behind KB at like 25. Couple trades I want to get your opinion on. So maybe a week into the league, you and I did a trade. Essentially, it's the 1.1, Waukesha. Well, I guess my pick's the 1.1 because I tanked.
Yeah, 1.2.
The 1.2 for Jalen Waddle. Knowing what we know about Jalen Waddle right now, wide receiver 7. Are you still doing that trade?
I think so. I think
so?
I'd do it. Yeah, to be completely honest with you, to take you through my timeline, I felt good about it. It was right after the McDaniel signing. I felt like they were going to get creative. I was definitely envisioning a Debo-esque role for Waddle this upcoming season. And then, I don't know, 3 days after we did the deal, Tyreek got dealt to Miami, and I wanted to blow my head off because my 2 best dynasty assets were now on the same team, and I was totally out of left field. So I definitely would have taken it back if I could have during, the months between probably that move and the start of the season. But as we know, honestly, shout out the Tua crew. Tua had a big first couple of weeks to start the year. Waddle was the beneficiary of his success early on, and I'm definitely super optimistic that'll continue. I think he's already proven he's a borderline fantasy wide receiver.
Right there.
a borderline wide receiver 1 this year, and certainly in the dynasty conversation. So I think you take the known commodity. Like you said, it's the 1-2. I think if it was Bijan, like we were talking about, then maybe that changes stuff. But all signs are pointing to him being the 1-1, and no one's touching your 50 points a week. So you're probably got that locked up. So I feel good about it. I think I would do that again.
Yeah, and that's always been my thing too, right? With when it comes to the picks, there's always the potential, but you have the proven commodity. You have a guy where I think it's safe to say that rookie year wasn't a fluke, and I even think that rookie year was so good that it's hard to even argue that in the first place. But it's like you said as well, right? I mean, maybe if you knew that it was going to be the 1-2, I mean, right now it is the 1-3 for what it's worth. I will be getting some points back, though. I think I'll be able to catch him in the next few weeks, but I hope. But yeah, it's like, if you knew that at the time, maybe you would have held it a little bit longer and you could have maybe squeezed more value out of that pick. But at the same time, if Jalen Waddle was in this draft,
he's going one. I mean,
he
I don't know. I'd probably
there's
still
the
take
argument for him to go over Bijan just because we've seen it. But
right.
I mean, I think that maybe comes down to team need. But besides that, I don't think he's going any later than 2.
Right.
And so
would
it's
you
like,
call it a fair trade?
What's that?
Would you call it a fair trade?
I think that's pretty fair. I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable, and that's something where I'm looking around and I'm kind of looking at some of the players that I got, and that's one of those things that you realize too. It's like, all right, you're getting a top pick in a draft. It's like, that I think that is a pretty fair trade, and it sounds like Wallace doesn't regret it all, and I wouldn't either, and I don't think you'll regret it either, Pete. Right? So I'd call that
that's
a win-win at least. Fair, that could be a little subjective, but I think it's for sure a win-win. That can't be argued.
I like it. One other trade I thought stuck out to me between you two. A lot of uncertainty at the time of the trade because it involved a lot of rookies.
Yep.
It was Nick. You got Ken Walker, who's now the starting running back, owns his own backfield in Seattle. KB, you got Gordon. No. Yeah. You got Melvin Gordon, Treylon Burks, and a third.
Yep.
Walker for Melvin Gordon, Treylon Burks, and a third. Was wondering what both your thoughts were looking back on that one.
Yeah, I'll start with that one. Yeah, I mean, I still feel fine about it. I drafted Ken because, where I was at the time, I was still kind of in that competitive mode. And I think at the time, I want to say I had Chubb, I had Swift, obviously, and then I think I had a big fall off, right? I think maybe at the time, Khalil Herbert, I don't know if I still had him on my roster, but I really didn't have much in terms of running back depth. So I was like, let me draft Ken Walker. I liked him a lot at Michigan State. Like I said, I was very high on him. I liked his running, ability from everything I had seen when I had watched him play. But then, as my ambitions changed with my team, I wanted to shift more from running back to wide receiver. And, of course, Treylon Burks is out right now. He's got the turf toe, but I mean, I think he looked great in his first few weeks. Especially those first 2 weeks when he was getting the targets. He was seeing the field more in those next 2 weeks, but he wasn't getting the same targets. The Titans, I think they were just more focused on giving Derrick Henry the ball 25 times. But, I feel great about it. Obviously, it feels like I took a hit with Burks getting the turf toe, and then, and like a week later, Kenneth Walker, having Penny go down, and all of a sudden the backfield is his. But, at the same time, it's like I was saying kind of at the top of the episode, I think everybody expected this to happen at some point in the season. Penny getting hurt, Walker, working more into the backfield, and then eventually taking it over. So I don't feel like, there's really been any much of a change. We haven't really seen much out of Ken Walker. Obviously, he had the huge touchdown last week, but it's not like he was, getting 10 yards per rush every carry or anything. And then, with Burks, there's obviously still a lot of unknowns, but I also bought him, as a guy that was going to develop and kind of grow into it. And, I expected a strong rookie season, but I really expect him to be more of a second, third year breakout player. Wallace, and I just feel like the rest was kind of throwing, right? I got more running back depth with Melvin Gordon. I got a draft pick and, whatever. But yeah, Wallace, how are you feeling on that side? I feel like you're feeling pretty good now with Walker taking over that backfield.
Yeah, honestly, whether Penny went down or not, I'd be feeling pretty good about it. Frankly, what it came down to for me was mainly just due to kind of the depth that I had at each position at running back. I really only had Brees as somebody that I was going to be a long-term hold at the running back position, where at receiver, obviously I probably had I don't know if I had Tyreek or DK or what, but had a big asset there. I had Waddle, I had guys like Tony that I really believe in, Dotson. I had Elijah Moore at the time, who is now Sky Moore in a different deal. But, regardless, it really came down to the depth at each position. I was like, it gave me an opportunity to, grab up another running back and someone who I felt like would be a long-term, dynasty asset, certainly, especially in the Seattle offense. They want to run the ball. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to see how that's going to go the rest of the way. I'm sure if it was just for this year, it's definitely looking in my favor. But, who knows? Burks could really be a stud for sure. Frankly, at the time, I was a bit surprised. The company I work for covers the Cowboys and the Titans. So every day I'm seeing shit about his freaking asthma on my Instagram feed. So I was shocked when you reached out to me about a potential deal. I was like, yeah, I guess the vibes around this guy are terrible. And I knew that was just, a lot of training camp buzz that's already become a non-issue. So, definitely wish the best for Burks as well, but I would do that deal again for sure.
You hear that, Pete? He wishes the best for somebody that he traded away.
Yeah,
Isn't that something how somebody's able to do that? And
yeah, he also came. I mean, Nick, you drew lines in the sand here. You came on our show for the first time and quoted two or not. That is a line in the sand. That is a line in the sand. So like, hey, it's Prophet Pete. You might have made an enemy. You might have made an enemy.
Pete, don't take it personally. We go way back. Come on,
the narrative,
man.
the narrative.
Hey, I'm neutral on the Tua issue. I was just happy as long as Waddle gets his targets, I could give a shit about how Tua plays. To be honest with you, so
this sounds like backtrack. This is a very hot topic. Tua is a hot topic on the show, and you came in with two or not. I couldn't believe it. Anyway,
but, you could not mention it. How could I not mention it?
But yeah, I mean, and then one more thing on Burks too. I mean, I will say the reason I was big on him was because I'm always looking for those. Right, everybody has value at a price, right? I mean, there are guys where you might say, absolutely not, when they're kind of cooking, but then all of a sudden the pendulum swings so far in the other direction. You're like, wait, hold on. I can get this guy for, whatever. And all of a sudden he's just on my roster. And if he continues to suck, then word. And if he doesn't, then all right, then that's awesome. And, that was one of those things where, I liked Burks because I liked his profile. And, I've been very into trying to find, just big, what I feel like are alpha receivers to, go on my team. I like that a lot in Dynasty. I want these big guys that I can kind of just rely on for the next 10 years. And, I see that opportunity with him in Tennessee. And, I always think it's lazy to be like, oh, AJ Brown did this, AJ Brown did that. But obviously there is that role for him in that offense. So it's like, I liked what I saw. He's just a crazy athlete. You can watch his tape against Bama, well, I guess last year, right? Yeah, last year, where he put up, huge numbers, had a huge touchdown, looked absolutely dominant against a really good defense. And, I like that a lot. And then I also did my due diligence on asthma. And, I learned that it was a bad asthma season for everybody. Everybody was killing everybody. The only reason we never heard about it with Burks is because at Arkansas, he was never in camp at that time. So he never had to miss any games, any practice. So that was all it was. I was like, all right, if that's really all it is that is tanking his value, then why wouldn't I try and get him and, see what's happening? And then, going into like the building of the trade, I just viewed it as simply trading back in the draft, right? Ken was the second overall pick. I believe Burks was the fifth overall pick. So, I think at the time Walker was definitely viewed as higher, but I didn't want to be too stingy with the deal because it's like I'm trading back 3 picks. I easily could have taken Treylon Burks with this pick if I wanted to. I want to get this guy, and I always say this about some people in our league where it's like, we're going to blow up a whole trade over like a 2025 third.
Yeah.
It's like I'm trying to get Treylon Burks. If you want this pick, like I'll throw it in. If you want it to be this pick, then all right, fine, because I'm getting the guy that I want. That's all that type of thing. So, I'm happy to get him. Obviously, right now, the momentum's in Ken's favor, but, I still like what I saw out of Burks. Hope for a speedy recovery. I'm glad it's not a serious injury at all. I don't think turf toe. I don't think it's ever been a career ender for anybody. So I'm just hoping that Burks gets in the classroom like he did when he was dealing with the asthma and conditioning stuff, keeps learning that playbook, and then comes back out. And, sometimes the time away is good for people. So, we'll see how it goes. But, Pete, you got any more trades that you want to go through?
No, I thought those were the ones two that stuck out. I mean, I do think I'm ready to call it an L. I know you said you were waiting on Lawrence and you want to give him time to develop and all that. I don't know, but I think it's an L. I mean, you got Hurts he looks like a top 5 dynasty QB with the rushing upside. Hurts is 24, Lawrence is 23. Very comparable right there. Hurts is blown out of the water early. I mean, he's in a much better team. You got a 23 second as well with Lawrence, but I'm ready to call that one a loss. But Nick, you want to comment on that one?
I think that I wouldn't go there yet. I'm a big Jalen Hurts guy, to be honest with you. So it was tough. What really came down to for me is I think at that time, obviously there was uncertainty. The Eagles have a ton of draft capital in this upcoming year, which is wild to consider the fact that they're undefeated and they're going to beat the Cowboys on Sunday night too. But that being said, they had a lot of draft capital. And so there wasn't really certainty around the position at quarterback. Is definitely something that they could target as soon as this upcoming draft class if this season didn't go well for Hurts. And while I thought that Hurts was going to put it together, I had to kind of take the certainty and the draft capital that was invested in Trevor Lawrence and knowing that he's going to be a starter in this league for a long time regardless. And so I did play it safe there. I recouped a second round pick. I don't remember in what year. It might even be a 23rd, if not maybe a 24th, which I think kind of tipped the scale and kind of made it a no-brainer for me. So I'm not too beat up about it. I mean, I would say that, Hurts, certainly for this season, he has a lot of upside, but I'm not really trying to compete for this season. I think, in a year or two, season or two, I wouldn't really rule it out that, Lawrence could even be a better fantasy quarterback at that time. And if you want to rewind the clock a little bit more, I'm pretty sure I got Jalen Hurts for Calvin Ridley in like a second round pick or some shit.
You stole him off the jump.
So I was like, I was playing with house money. So what was I going to do? And then you get the chance to get the 1-1 in the previous year's draft. And now he has an adult head coach. I'll take that deal. I think I would honestly do that one again too. And I love Jalen Hurts. I really do. And, I think, Simcoe's team is a powerhouse, and I think they're definitely the title favorite, but I would do that deal again.
Not just the favorite. It's etched in the trophy already.
Oh yeah. It's like the runaway favorite. But I side with Wallace on this one. I think it's really just too soon to tell. I think it's more of a matter of, directions that teams are going in. Jalen Hurts is obviously way more of the win now guy. But it still wouldn't shock me if Trevor Lawrence is the long.
He's only 1 year older.
Yeah, but he's the win now guy because Trevor Lawrence
better now.
What?
Because he's playing better now.
Yeah, because he has the rushing upside. That doesn't mean like
better.
But what does that mean? I mean, we're talking about a dynasty league. Hold on, Pete. Is this a redraft league or no?
No, this is a dynasty league.
Okay, this is a dynasty league. So Trevor Lawrence was one of the greatest prospects to come into this league. This is like once every however long, right? We're talking about Andrew Luck. We're talking about Peyton Manning. These are guys that he was thrown in with. And, I think he's looked good. I mean, like I said, I don't think the stats are told the whole story. I think when you really watch him play, like he looks like a good quarterback. And, these guys, like I said, you need to give these guys time to develop. He doesn't have that same rushing upside that Jalen Hurts has. So just because of Jalen Hurts is coming out and playing, MVP football right now, I mean, Jalen Hurts was playing good fantasy football last year and he was still in danger of getting benched. So it's like, I just feel like, we can't forget that, they weren't sold on him last year. I think he's definitely getting his way in there now this year, but, we can't let a few games early in the season, really dictate that and call this trade a loss.
I think there's something to be said about the weapons as well. I mean, the Jaguars, everyone knows they spent big money on Christian Kirk, but for what it's worth, Kirk has been really great this season. But, beyond that, he's got Zay Jones and Marvin Jones and Evan Ingram. These guys are basically corpses running routes out there for him. These are guys all on their second chance or third or more, right? So I think once the Jaguars actually, again, they have an adult in the room. I think that, we've already seen how much better and how much more confident the offenses look just a couple weeks in. Obviously, he had some low moments. One of them was in that monsoon against Philadelphia. Last week against the Texans was disappointing. But I think as his weapons develop, the Eagles did the right thing, right? They invested in talent. They have a great tight end. They invested in a true number one receiver in A.J. Brown. They invested a high first-round pick previous year for Devonte Smith. He's working with weapons that, again, if all else is equal, is Hurts probably a better, dynasty asset or a fantasy asset because of the rushing upside? Certainly he could be. But I think that,
but how can you say that? I mean, there's a long history of
right now
you're looking at archetypes.
No,
when you're just looking at archetypes, there's a long history of guys like Lawrence having infinitely more longevity than guys like Jalen Hurts because he's not running, he's staying in the pocket. And when you look at who wins Super Bowls, who has the longer careers, it's the guys that throw in that stay in the pocket and throw the ball. And I think that the good thing that Trevor Lawrence has is that he's not a running quarterback. He's a quarterback that can run. So he can still use his legs to get out of the pocket, get himself 5 yards here and there. But at the end of the day, he could stand in there. He can throw it 40 times. He's a big guy. He can do all that. And just because he's gotten off to, what we think is a slow start, he's 23. This is a dynasty league. We cannot overreact to 6 weeks into the season. And, 2 weeks ago, Trevor Lawrence was a top 10 quarterback. Just because he's had 2 bad games in a row does not mean anything. He's a second-year guy. Like I said, we just cannot be overreacting to be, ringing the bell here and calling this a huge loss for Wallace. I think that's just a ridiculous take, Pete, and you know that too.
Moving on, I'd like to debut a new segment on the LP show.
Let's hear it.
I don't know how this is going to go. Working title. Pick a player with Pete. Nick, KB, you're both going to get one guess. I've got 3 players. QB5. Can't leave your phone. Can't leave your phone. No dozen cheating for those dozen fans. No, nothing like that. QB5, QB6, QB7. I'm gonna give you the choice. Pick 2.
What are these rankings? Are these points
QB5, QB6, QB7 right now in the league?
But like by points?
Yeah, by points scored.
Okay.
I'm thinking you guys decide on two of A, B, or C. I'll give you those two names, and then you got to guess the third after
I'm skeptical in this game. Let's get to the,
It's a working title. All right, QB5, QB6, QB7, player A, player B, player C. Pick two. Pick two players, A, B, or C. I'll tell you their names, and then you got to guess the third player.
All right.
All right.
Let's hear. Oh, I mean, let's hear.
What do you want? You want A and C? Do you want A and B? Do you want B and C? You guys got to come to a decision. You guys got to come to an agreement.
All right, Wallace, you pick one. You go first. You pick one, and then I'll pick the other one.
All right. B, player B. Is that what I'm doing? Yeah.
I want C, player C.
All right. Player B, QB6, Geno Smith, 1,305 passing yards, 9 TDs, 2 interceptions. Player C, Joe Burrow, QB7, 1,316 passing, 9 TDs, 5 interceptions. Essentially the same players this year so far, with the difference of 3 interceptions towards Burrow. Who is QB5?
Oh, so is Geno Smith the better dynasty quarterback then?
No, that would be this game is in a redraft. In a redraft sense.
Okay.
We already made that clear. QB player A, QB5, 1,241 passing, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions.
Can I get the rushing touchdowns?
QB5, 1,241 passing, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions.
All right.
That makes it sound like his refusal to give you the rushing stats makes it sound like it's a rushing quarterback.
Yeah.
Or is it a QB who can run?
That's very
It could be. My gut is Kyler because
you said 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions.
Like
1,241 passing QB5.
Yeah. 6 touchdowns through. I mean, what, we're 5 weeks in? That's not many touchdowns. To be QB5, it's got to have a rushing upside. So I feel like Kyler, because it's not Lamar, it's not Josh Allen.
Do you think Wentz has slipped out? Because wasn't Wentz in the top 5 for a bit? That's right. That's kind of what I was thinking, but
yeah.
But I do like the rushing point. I do feel like it could be a guy like Kyler because of that.
I knew Geno was QB6. I misunderstood the game, and that's why I picked player B. I could have.
How many touchdowns does Geno have?
I was really hoping you guys went A and C, so I could keep the hidden player being Geno Smith. But hey, chips fall as they may.
Yeah. Do we each get one guess?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'll say Kyler because
all right, and I'll go Carson Wentz.
It's Kyler Murray, QB5. 1,241 passing, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Kyler Murray is player A. Nick, that was a great pull. Tell me that kind of had legs, right? We started a little rough, but that's got legs.
Yeah, it was
perhaps
a bit clunky.
I think it was just a lack of understanding heading into the game. It's really where you lost us.
It's a working title. It's a working title.
You got any more rounds for us, Pete?
I've got one more question for Nick, but it has not. It's just one question for Nick that I.
All right, so okay, last question. Rowback question.
All right, show BAC. No free ads. Nick Wallace.
Yep.
If you were in a dynasty draft and you have the 1.1 pick, a draft where you can only have this one item for the rest of your life, dynasty leafy green, which one are you going with of all the leafy greens at the 1-1?
So a dynasty startup for all the assets, all the current players.
All the leafy greens. The leafy greens. We're talking lettuce. We're talking leafy greens.
I don't know if that answered my question, but gut, knee jerk. I think it's Josh Allen.
this one didn't land. This one didn't land.
Well, that's what happens when you try to bring inside jokes from the group chat onto a show with somebody.
I was hoping he would, and whatever. And that was the last question for Nick Wallace.
All right. Well, you know what? No final comments from anybody. Nah, that's just good. Okay. We'll end the show there. As always, we're brought to you by Sundog Multimedia. Easy peasy moving and service. Wallace, you got any closing comments?
No, just thanks for having me. Let me know when you when you need somebody to come up with some real segments, and maybe I can put some shit together and come back and bail out Pete a time or two.
Yeah, after that, I'm thinking about I might start looking for a writing staff. After that.
It was shredded iceberg, Nick. The answer was shredded iceberg.
Hilarious. Thanks, man.
Pete, you got anything else?
No, that's about to do it.
All right, we'll leave it at that. It's the Lex and Pete show. This is week 6. I will be coming to you from a new studio next week, as I will be moving to New Jersey over the weekend. I look forward to that. Good luck to all you guys in your matchups. Good luck to everybody in the league in their matchups. We will see you next week.